Hi, I'm Maureen. Welcome to Before an Audience, tips and tricks to reading your writing in public. Welcome back to those of you who are returning, and welcome to those who are new. I appreciate you both. Thank you very much for being here. Today, we're going to talk about beats and pauses and what those mean to a reader. Now, they're different for a reader than they are for a writer. They're going to be different things. They have different meanings. And we're focusing today on the reader portion. But these are little beautiful tools. These are jewels of tools that you will be able to use from now until the end of your career as a writer, if you so choose. The thing about a beat, it's a little... Okay, no, let me start with what is a beat for a writer, because that's where everybody is right now. So for a writer, it's a change in sequence. It's getting from one place to another. You can have a book filled with thousands of beats because you start here and then you end up there. You start here, you end up there. And from where you end up, you move to another place. So it's where the action can take you in a story. But for a reader, it's a moment of silence. And I mean a brief moment of silence. Just this. That's all it is. That little bit that you're going to present when you want the audience to listen. Just that little bit, as opposed to a pause, which is a longer period of time. It helps to build suspense, curiosity, and any number of things. But you hear the difference? Here's a beat. This is what it sounds like. This is as long as it lasts. This is a pause. This is how long it lasts. And this is what it does. So both of those tools help to communicate mood, tone, style. They communicate so many things. And listen, when you watch movies, when you watch television, when you hear other people reading, if you listen to audiobooks, there will be hundreds of times where a beat and a pause has affected the way you've heard or feel about what you're hearing without even knowing it's there. It's like this beautiful little silent jewel. So that's all I'm going to tell you about it. From then on, I'm going to read, because that's the best way to hear what they're like. Now, today we're going to be reading from another Daphne Mask, and this is the romance, Haunting Indiscretions. We're reading from the middle of the book. Now, I mentioned in our first blog about where to select the reading. So for this one, I'm choosing a very specific couple that I want to communicate. So in this reading, we're going to have two voices, both male and female, and you'll hear a little slight difference in my voice. In our next video blog, I'm going to go over multi-character voices and how to manage multi-character readings. But for this one, we're just going to have two, and and it's a very moody piece, and you'll see how that works. The parlor was thick with gray, overwhelming sadness. If they listened closely enough, they could hear the lamentations of the swans. Over the years, they had mutually learned to block out the emptiness of their barren existence. But now, the gloomy, distant cry could pull them into a soulless, dark, vacuous stillness. It was inescapable. Okay, that's a pretty heavy, if I might say, very emotional scene. But I used a lot of beats throughout the course of this, so I'm going to go back over that. The parlor was thick with gray, overwhelming sadness. I could say it another way. The parlor was thick with gray, overwhelming sadness. You see, it has a totally different mood. That's just the way it works. And then we're going to move on to the last sentence. But now, the gloomy, distant cry could pull them into a soulless, dark, vacuous silence. It was inescapable. Now, a lot of people will say a beat is like a comma, right? It's just that little bitty hair of a second, or it could be used after a period. That's a common place that it's used. But you don't want to put a lot of time in there, but you do want to accentuate the mood. I'm going to read that last sentence a different way. But now the gloomy, distant cry could pull them into a soulless, dark, vacuous stillness. It was inescapable. Very different. I'm not leading you down that same dark path, but it's not lighthearted by any stretch, but it is getting the point across. Annabelle and Gerald were both pensive, as if they were waiting for a dignitary and worrying that he might never come. Their past indecency had now caught up with them. They would have to expose their indiscretions in order to save their souls from this wretched purgatory. She stood at the window, staring down at the tree-lined street. Not even so much as a dog walker or a stray cat wandered by to catch her attention. That was a pause. So now I'm going to do it without a pause. She stood at the window staring down at the tree-lined street. Not even so much as a dog walker or a stray cat wandered by to catch her attention. The afternoon was gloomy and gray, matching the hazy distance between them. When did we lose touch with each other? She asked without turning to face him. I'm not bothering with any of that now, he said with an eye closed and his head resting against the back of the Chesterfield, Queen Anne. You never bother with it, or with me. When will something be important enough for you to bother with it again? Now here, you can hear her side of the conversation and you hear his side of the conversation, right? Physically, he's just, oh God, I don't want to deal with this. And she is obviously wanting to still engage with him and wanting to find out what happened, right? So there's other ways I'm communicating this, through my eyes and through my attitude. And that's going to come out in the dialogue. We talked about dialogue before. That's the heartbeat of the piece. So I'm going to do those 2 lines again, or 3 lines again. And her voice will go up just a little bit. His voice goes down just a little bit. When did we lose touch with each other? She asked without turning to face him. I'm not bothering with any of that now, he said with his eyes closed and his head resting against the back of the Chesterfield, Queen Anne. You never bother with it or me. When will something be important enough for you to bother with it again? We have a chance here, woman, and we have to take it. And Gerald said, his voice rising in aggravation, but you're setting up to spoil it with your foolishness. Now, I'm going to take a little pause because I'm going back to the narrative, right? So I want a little space there. But you're setting up to spoil it with your foolishness. She continued staring out the window, holding back her tears with rapid blinking. Silence slipped between them again. Hopelessness rose up perpetually, haunting them to die a second death. Their existence was forsaken in this theater, as though they were forgotten prisoners of war. In their youth, now I gave a little beat here too, because the tone is going to change. Now we're moving into their youth, when they were young, when they met, when everything was fun and lovely. So that's a good place for a short pause, not a long pause, but a little longer than a beat. Their existence was forsaken in this theater, as though they were forgotten prisoners of war. In their youth, they were reckless in love, with money, time, simply everything. Reverence for others was fodder for their ridicule. Patience and consideration was time misspent. Irrationally, they thought the penalties of their misbehaviors would end with their deaths. All the wasted time spent in clandestine affairs and tawdry playmaking would cease to matter. Life was meant to be lived to its fullest, regardless of the consequences. But now, hoisted onto this forgotten island and floating free of time and space, they are being forced to reconcile their consciences in their current existential vacuum. That's all for today. Thank you so much for joining. If you enjoyed what you heard, this is going to be a 10-part series, and please subscribe. Take care.